I have spoken at length about this Bean Motif, which is these 5 notes that come up everywhere throughout the entire score. It's in the melody of Giants in the Sky. It's in the melody of Rapunzel's theme. It's in everywhere, and it represents the 5 beans of the beanstalk that kind of set the whole plot of the show in motion. But we're not even going to talk about that motif today because we've talked about it so much, and there's another one that is almost as widely used throughout this score, and it comes to represent one particular character who is very, very important. We meet the witch in the opening number. She was originally played by Bernadette Peters, of course, and she has this like rap song at the beginning where she sets the scene for why this curse is placed on the baker and baker's wife's house. And in that song, we have this chord right here. And it's played on a harpsichord sound. That chord, and it keeps being reused in different keys all throughout the song. Here it is again. Here it is again. Here it is again. Like, it's all over this entire song in different keys. That chord comes to represent the witch, and it's kind of the witch's signature chord. And there are a few different ways of analyzing that chord because it's not really a standard chord. One way of thinking about that chord, I'll play it in the original key that we see it in. One way of thinking about this chord is that if you take away this bottom note completely, you actually are just left with a major triad. It's very simple. And then you add what's called the flat 6th note, because this is an F sharp major triad, and the sixth note in the F sharp major scale is the D sharp. So if you flatten that, you make it 1 note lower, you get to that D. So we just call it the flat 6th. The simple version of that is just a major chord with this particular dissonant note in it that's added onto the bottom. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, though, is if you were to take this note and just lower it a semitone, you would have a major triad down here with this interval, a major 7th, which is kind of a dissonant interval, and that chord is a standard 4-note chord that we call the major 7th chord. And so in a way, it's either a major chord with a dissonant note on the bottom, or it's a major 7th chord that has been what's called augmented, which is when we raise this middle note up a semitone. So one way of looking at it is like a major triad over this note in the bottom. Another way of looking at it is an augmented major 7th chord. However you want to look at it, either way, it is just a little bit off. There's something strange about it. There's this dissonance here. There's this, like, the augmented chord that is kind of spooky sounding because it's not major or minor. It's this other thing. It's a very weird sound, and it represents kind of the magic and mystery of the character of the witch. And we associate that chord with the witch right off the bat. The first time in the entire score that we hear that chord comes here, which is right before we meet the witch. Cinderella is talking to her stepsisters, and then the stepsisters laugh. They go, hee, 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 hee. And then it segues to this. And right away, we get into the witch's rap. This last chord here is the first time we hear the witch's chord. If I were to take this A and this C sharp and just move them up the octave, oops, there. We've got that augmented chord with the major 7th. Here's the major triad with that weird note on the bottom. That is the witch's chord right here. So the last chord that segues us into the next part of the opening where we meet the witch is the witch's chord. So it's kind of like it's telling us, what character are we about to meet next? This one, the witch. And the witch's chord, something I think is so interesting about the witch's chord is that it's actually tied into the bean motif. This bean motif is baked into this score everywhere, all over the place. And actually, the first time we hear the witch's chord, we also hear the bean motif on top. We get this, the chord is happening here, and then the violin is playing the bean motif over top. So we get the bean motif and the witch's chord played at the same time. But the witch's chord itself has echoes of the bean motif in it. And the witch's chord and the bean motif, the witch and the beans themselves are so important to the plot that the witch's motif and the bean's motif are baked into the like first notes that we hear in the entire show. Check this out. Remember when we saw that video of Sondheim talking about the very first moment of the show when he wants that big accent in the orchestra to wake up the audience? We've got this. This is the beginning of the entire show. That's the first thing we hear. If we take these two notes and then these three notes and we put them all in the same octave, so we take this D and we put it up here, and then we take this A and we put it up here, and then we can take this A and B and move down here. This is D, A, C, G, and B, and this is G, C, D, B, and A. It's the exact same notes in a different order. And then, look at this chord. That is a standard major triad. All we have to do is move that G up a semitone, augment it, and we get the witch's chord. So the witch's chord takes this theme, which is central to the whole show, and we know it's central to the whole show because it's the first thing we hear in the entire show, and it just perverts it a little bit. It makes it a little bit mysterious and a little bit magical and a little bit nasty. And how did we get to this theme in the first place? We just took the bean motif and made a chord out of those notes. And so that is how the bean motif and the original motif from the opening number and the witch's chord are all connected to each other. And the fact that every single musical motif in this show is so interconnected with each other just helps the score feel totally cohesive, and it helps it really feel like, as an audience member, you trust the writer, you trust that there are layers and layers and layers, and you trust that there's a lot of thought put into it, and it gives you the ability to take the score and analyze it incredibly deeply because you know for sure nothing in this score is random.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. MARQUEE is a free weekly Broadway appreciation newsletter with essays, reviews, piano talks, Broadway blasts, quizzes, and more. Sign up for the complimentary or premium edition and learn about all classes and projects at thebroadwaymaven.com. And here's a video I think you'll like.